tripped over a little tripod of some sort. Oh, my toes. Mm. Well, Exodus chapter 10, regardless of the condition of my toe, we're moving into the eighth plague, the plague of locusts. Now, the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart." So we're getting into this part where the Lord is starting to harden his heart. And it's interesting because we see it heavy at the beginning. Pharaoh hardened his heart, Pharaoh hardened his heart, Pharaoh hardened his heart, Pharaoh hardened his heart. And now we're starting to see the Lord hardens his heart. We saw it back in chapter 9, verse 12. And so now we're seeing it again here in chapter 10. And what we find is that God will keep people going down the path they're on. When people are choosing their way and they've kind of decided, like, this is the road I'm going on, there is a point where God will allow them to continue down that road. In fact, we talked a little bit about this last Sunday night at our church, where in Isaiah chapter 63, towards the end, I think verse 17 or so, it's like, Lord, why have you, made us this way? Continue down these things. And we looked at Romans 11, I believe. It talks about how blindness in part has come to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles. And so we see where they've made their decision. They're pretty set in their ways. And God's like, okay, and I will let you carry on down that road. So God is hardened his heart now in the hearts of his servants. Why? That I may show these signs of mine before him. So it's even that God wanted to get all these plagues out, because these were going to be signs. And you're going to find by the time they get to Jericho, everyone's going to be terrified of them, because the stories of who they are have made it up there. Remember, they're not going to get to Jericho for 40 years. But by that time, people are going to know who the children of Israel are. And these stories of these plagues are going to pave the way for them. And that you may tell in the hearing of your son and your son's sons the mighty things that I have done in Egypt, my signs which I have done among them, that you may know that I am the Lord. And so again, we see God is wanting to do these things as a testimony to future generations. So Moses and Aaron came to Pharaoh and said to him, "Thus says the Lord God of the Hebrews, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, that they may serve me. Or else, if you refuse to let my people go, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory. They shall cover the face of the earth. No one will be able to see the earth. They shall eat the residue of what is left, which remains to you from the hail. And they shall eat every tree which grows up out of the field. They shall fill your houses, the house of your servants, and the house of the Egyptians, which neither your fathers nor your fathers' fathers have seen, since the day that they were on the earth to this day." And he turned and went out from Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh's servants said to him, "How long shall this man be a snare to us? Let the man go, that they may serve the Lord their God. Do you not know that Egypt is destroyed?" So Moses and Aaron were brought again to Pharaoh, and he said to them, "Go serve the Lord your God. Who are the ones that are going?" And Moses said, "We will go with our young and our old, with our sons and our daughters, with our flocks and our herds. We will go, for we must hold a feast to the Lord." Then he said to them, "The Lord had better be with you when I let you and your little ones go. Beware, for evil is ahead of you." "Not so. Go now, you who are men, and serve the Lord, for that is what you desired." And they were driven out from Pharaoh's presence. So again, what it is Pharaoh is saying, no, only the men can go. I'm not going to let the women and children go, just the men. So the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for locusts, that they may come upon the land of Egypt and eat every herb of the land and all that the hail has left." Remember, the hail destroyed most everything up until this point. So Moses stretched out his rod over the land of Egypt. The Lord brought an east wind on the land all that day and that night, and when it was morning, and the east wind brought the locusts. So coming in from the sea is the idea. The locusts went up over the land of Egypt, rested on the territory of Egypt, and they were very severe. Previously there had been no such locust as they, nor shall there be such after them. So this is like a one-time deal, the crazy amount of locusts here. For they covered the face of the whole earth, and the land was darkened, and they ate every herb of the land, and all all the fruit of the trees that the hail had left. So there remained nothing green on the trees. So I've got a few stories here I could share with you, but do note it said that there was never going to be locusts ever again as crazy as this. Well, here's a couple stories for you. In 1962, July the 28th, India decides to team up with Pakistan to try and fight locusts that were invading their countries. They fight all the way through December and end up killing about 1 billion locusts. Just reading stuff between 1949 and 1963, about 100 million pounds of food were annually destroyed by locusts. The largest ever recorded in modern history, so not including what happened with Pharaoh, but according to the Bible, this has to be smaller than what Egypt experienced. About 300 billion locusts attacked South Africa in 1784, covering an area of 2,000 square miles. So guys, you got to think that's like driving from here in Washington down to San Diego, and then almost all the way across the nation the other way. So it's almost all of the United States of America. They were eating 600,000 tons of food every day. And eventually they were blown out to sea and they died there. And when the dead locusts washed back to shore, there was a pile of dead locusts on the seashore, 5 feet tall, and it stretched for 50 miles. So, we're told here that whatever Egypt experienced was worse than this. And the crazy part, it was probably even more condensed because it wasn't covering the large territory. It was really just Egypt. And so God sends in locusts, that would just blacken out the sun and just insane. And it says again, though, that Pharaoh calls Moses, verse 16, "Oh, I've sinned against you and your God." We talked about that yesterday. "Now, therefore, please forgive me only this once, and entreat the Lord that he may take away from me this death only." Notice, forgive me only this once, that he may take away from me this death only. Once again, you find some people are showing up to church or whatever, and they want God to solve their problems. They just aren't looking to the Lord to solve their sin problem. And if we want God to help us with our addiction, and we want God to help us with our money problems, and we want God to help us with our this and our that, our sickness, but we don't want God to help us with our sin, well, then our hearts aren't in the right place. The most important thing that you need God to help you with is your sin. And everything else are just side issues. And Pharaoh never gets this. That's the catch with Pharaoh. He gets upset. He doesn't like what's happening to him. He wants changes in his circumstances, but he has no interest in a changed heart. And God uses that. God knows that Pharaoh's not coming around, and so he uses it to get his will done. But, says the Lord in verse 19, he turned a very strong west wind, which took the locusts and blew them into the Red Sea, kind of like the other example I gave. And there remained not one locust in all the territory of Egypt, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the children of Israel go. So again, the Lord continues to do this work, and then he brings darkness. So we're going to just knock out the darkness here. Sounds kind of cool. Knock out the darkness. Anyway. 21, the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward heaven, and there will be darkness over the land, and darkness which may be felt." So Josephus writes about this, and he said that it was even hard to breathe. So it's not just darkness, but complete, utter darkness. And I don't know how many of you have experienced, it is actually a unique thing to have utter darkness. Total and complete darkness. You got to kind of go in some place where everything's shut off and not even, a little bit of light sneaks in. One thing we like to do, at least if you're hanging out with me, in Israel, Hezekiah's tunnel will turn off all the flashlights. And it's kind of surreal because it's just, you can do this and you can't see anything. But this is even different. This is thick. You could feel the darkness as if something was in the air, and it made it heavy to breathe, almost like a mist. If you've ever been in, like, not fog, but I mean like a thick mist, where it's like you can feel the air you're breathing because of the humidity in the air. Well, similar, but darkness. And so Moses stretched out his hand. There was the thick darkness in all the land of Egypt. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days. But all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. And so that's the other crazy thing. What would it be like, almost like passing through a veil, passing through a wall where I can't see, and all of a sudden, whoosh. Imagine what it would have been like in Goshen, having black walls surrounding you. I mean, sometimes it's fun to just chew on and think about what this all would have looked like and what it would have been like, even being one of the Israelites with just black walls. I'm assuming they couldn't, but maybe they could look one way and see perfectly fine. And it wasn't until you crossed the threshold that all of a sudden things went black. It's hard to tell when it's supernatural, right? But Pharaoh called Moses, verse 24, said, hey, only let your flocks and your herds be kept back. Let your little ones also go with you. So now you see again, now let's get to the end. Moses said, you must also give us sacrifices, burnt offerings, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. Our livestock also shall go with us, not a hoof shall be left behind, for we must take some of them to serve the Lord our God. Even we do not know with what we must serve the Lord until we arrive. It's like, well, I don't know what we're going to need, so we just got to bring it all. Because if God says sacrifice every one of your livestock, that's what we're going to do. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let them go. Pharaoh said to him, get away from me. Take heed to yourself and see my face no more. For in the day you see my face, you shall die. So Moses said, you have spoken well. I will never see your face again. So we'll lead up into the death of the firstborn tomorrow. But spent a lot of time talking about locusts. Here's the big thing. 2. Okay, these are good takeaways. And these are opposite sides of a coin, or opposite attitudes, really on a spectrum. First, we see in verse 24, only let your flocks and your herds be kept back. This is how Satan works. There's a lot of good lessons of spiritual warfare found in Exodus and found with Pharaoh, because Pharaoh is a picture of Satan. People talking about, casting out demons and fighting Satan, but it's like, read what the Bible has to say. And it's not always big lights and smoke and, it's simple stuff like this. Satan will say, fine, she has committed to go to church, but only go Sunday. Or, faithfully go, but don't tithe, don't give. And what you find is Satan is always realizing that they've won the battle so far. So let them have that. Just don't let them go all in. It's okay if we let them hear, but don't let them go more. Make sure they're holding something back. And that's what he tries to do with you, is to make sure you're holding something back. So just like Pharaoh here says, well, you can go, but leave the herds. Satan will say the same thing to the Christian. Well, you can go to church, just don't make it to the prayer meeting. You can go to church, just don't serve. You can go to church, just don't give. You can go to, and he wants you to hold something back. But look at the opposite attitude. Look at Moses. I have to show up with everything. And why? Because if God asks for everything, God will get everything. That's the point. He's like, I can't leave the herds behind because I don't know what God's going to ask of me. Well, can't you leave one sheep behind, Moses? I get it. You need like one of every animal because, God might want a bull, or God might want a turtle dove, or God might want a ram. But do you need to bring what if you bring 80%? How about 80%? And Moses says, no, I must show up with 100%, because if that's what God asks for, that is what God is going to get. So I want to encourage you. How does this play out in your life? You have Satan over here on one side. He's saying, you can do this. I'm okay with you continuing in this pattern of worship as long as you hold back. And you got Moses over here. I'm showing up with everything, ready to give everything, because if God asks for it, that's what God is going to get. So, beautiful lessons in the book of Exodus. We're going to get to building the tabernacle and stuff later on, and there's some really cool stuff in there too. And we may kind of breeze over some of that as it gets repetitive, but we'll stop and look at the symbolism and look at those pictures and stuff in there. I might have to go back and listen to Chuck Missler again. I know that guy, I was just hearing him offhandedly refer to some stuff about the tabernacle recently, and it's like everything in the tabernacle, it's long and tedious, but the dimensions mean something. The materials used mean something. The order in which things are placed means something. And so it's cool. All this stuff is not just stories, because they are. They are events from history. But as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10, they were written for our learning, right? For us, unto whom the ends of the age have come. Like, we're the ones who get to learn in all these great lessons. So there you go. Are you holding stuff back? Have you shown up ready to sacrifice whatever God asks you? Or are you taking Pharaoh's advice and just, I'm showing up willing to give this much, but I'm leaving a whole bunch back at home because I'd hate to lose it. All right. God bless you guys. I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning as we head into chapter 11. And we may even start working our way into chapter 12, which will probably take us a couple days because the Passover is quite an important chapter to understand. So God bless you guys, and I will see you guys mañana.